Hello everyone to Global Fact 7. I know it's quite late into the night for many of you who are viewing us online from different time zones, but it's a bright and sunny morning here in Mumbai, India. I have a wonderful set of panelists with me who are joining me from across the country, and we are going to discuss today the scope of fact checking in Indian languages and examine the progress we have made over the last few years and the challenges as well. So let me begin with a few slides. As we know, fact checking it's not a new phenomenon at all. Fake news has been rampant for many years, especially on social media. Attention only post November 2016 in the post-Trump era. Demonization of mainstream media. Media will not tell you this. Prostitutes, news traders. These are some of the terms that we've all been getting used to, and in fact, we've got used to it now. Mainstream media also underestimated the impact of fake news. Now, this is something that even the mainstream media editors, they also accept the fact that while they were not looking at social media at all, the political IT cells had built a robust online army much before any of us as journalists thought that social media is a place where we need to pay our attention on how stories are spreading. Now let's examine how what our fact checking journey has been so far. In 2014 to 2000, between 2014 to 2016, there were about two digital websites that were looking at social media and fact checking, and also looking at public statements made by politicians. In 2017, there were two more players that came in, including Boom. Between 2018 to 2020, we saw a rush of fact-checking enterprises that came up. Some legacy players, but majority of them being very small first-time fact-checkers who were coming into examining all the variety of social media claims. So right now we have about 14 IFCN certified fact checkers. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that this is the entire ecosystem of fact checking, but these are the 14 players who have subjected themselves to the scrutiny of a global fact checking network, and have also followed and are following the code of principles that make it extremely important why people should trust you for the kind of stories that we write. I've just done a dipstick study, and I found that there are about 75 full-time fact checkers across 15 languages. So we are now in 15 languages, not just in English and Hindi, like we saw probably in the years of 2017 and 18. Facebook also started the 3PFC program, and right now they have about 8 fact checkers across English and 11 Indian languages. And key platforms are Twitter, WhatsApp, TikTok, Hello, and ShareChat, apart from Facebook, of course. Some of these platforms are extremely regional centric, so you'll find a lot of misinformation spreading on these platforms, and that's why many of the fact checkers are working in those areas also. The slide that you see are the logos of all the fact checking initiatives that we have right now in the country. And one more slide that I can show you are how fact check, the term fact check is now being used in multiple languages by fact checkers and mainstream media journalists. Okay, so now let us look at what have been the positives for Indian fact checkers. Fact checking rapidly scaled up over the last 2 years. Majority of the fact checkers are startups. Now, this is a very welcome move, except for two big legacy players who are there in fact checking and IFCN certified. I understand that the rest, all of them, are digital startups. They are startups that started with the premise that they want to fact check social media, and also politicians and political parties and media. A good mix of journalists and first-time fact checkers, and fact checkers actively debunking social media posts, politicians, and mainstream media, and several training initiatives leading to an expansion of the ecosystem of fact checkers. So, what are our key challenges? I would like to, like all of y'all, all our viewers, to pay attention to this slide, because this is broadly what we are going to discuss with the wonderful set of panelists we have. High volume of user generated content versus limited fact checking strength. Now, this is something that we all know. We've been struggling with it. How do you meet roughly about 400 to 500 million people who are online in India? And that's a huge challenge. Just the number of people who are online in India are equivalent to populations of several countries. So that's the challenge we are facing in India. Quality of journalism practiced by legacy media houses, and are there training challenges there, and what are the opportunities because of that? Threats and intimidation by those impacted by fact checks, and many fact checkers do tell me that it's not just the politicians who are threatening them, but it's also many of the smaller publishing houses, who operate in very local area and local jurisdictions, who are threatened by fact checks. And sometimes, on Facebook, they are demonetized. They are not able to monetize their content because of the flags that they receive, and that's why there's a lot of pushback which they are seeing there. Apart from the IT cells that run large pages on many of these platforms and are definitely a threat. Also, funding and self-sustainability. Now, this is a very important point that fact checkers around the world are discussing. Are we too dependent on specific certain platforms for our existence? What can we do so that we can bring up sustainable subscription models, and also, encourage people to pay for fact checking? Now, that's going to be a big challenge. So let me start by introducing my wonderful set of panelists today. And we've got four of them. First, I'd like to introduce Rakesh Dubbudu. He's the founder of Factly, a well-known data journalism and fact-checking initiative. Rakesh is also a well-known transparency campaigner in India and is currently one of the co-conveners of the National Campaign for People's Right to Information. He has immense experience in government policy, data, and fact-checking. An engineer by education, he has won multiple awards for his work. Hi, Rakesh.
Hi, Jency.
Yeah, the next we have Rahul Namboori. He's the co-founder and editorial head of Crescendo India. He started the investigative journalism effort as a full-fledged fake news busting and fact-checking initiative in 2018, and his company Crescendo conducts fact checks across 10 different languages. Hi, Rahul.
Hey, hi, Jency. Hi, all. Uh, Good to be here,
Yeah.
and good to be speaking on the regional challenges.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. Thank you for being here. Then we have Tushar Barot, a good friend. He's been over 20 years of experience in journalism across print, radio, TV, online, and digital. He's worked with the Sunday Times and BBC News in the UK and India before moving to Facebook 18 months ago. He has also done fellowships on emerging tech and news at Harvard, the Tau Center for Journalism, and Stanford. He manages the Facebook's fact-checking partnerships in India, as well as running training initiatives and industry collaborations on combating misinformation and developing digital journalism skills. Hello, Tushar.
Hey, Jency. Great to be here.
Yeah. Next, we have Surabhi Malik, someone with whom I've been associated over the last 3 to 4 years since we started our fact-checking journey. She's the India program director at Internews, an international non-profit that runs media development programs in over 50 countries across the world. Surabhi is a former journalist and a media and verification trainer who in 2018 launched and led the Google News Initiative India Training Network, an initiative where Boom was also involved. And it was a collaborative training effort led by Internews that helped many journalists in India learn online verification and fact-checking skills, and resulted in the launch of many dedicated fact-checking initiatives. Her current focus is building a network of news and information literacy educators in India. Hi, Surabhi.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back with the entire fact-checking community through this virtual conference, thanks to the efforts of the FCN team. I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you in this panel and later.
Thanks, Surabhi. And that's the panel. And my name is Jency Jacob. I'm the managing editor of Boom. I've divided this into 4 segments. The first segment, I would like to give 3 minutes each for the panelists to talk about their biggest challenges while dealing with language misinfo and opportunities they see. Let's remember one thing, that misinformation that you see in regional languages are not the same as you see probably in the English media. So Twitter, Facebook, always the grouse has been that majority of the fact checkers are only looking at English language misinformation. At best now Hindi as well, because Hindi is a language which many people in the country speak and understand. But what about the other Indian languages? And are Indian fact checkers paying a lot of attention there? And that's why I'd like each of the panelists to make their opening comments, talk about the opportunities and also the challenges, and what have been the positives that they have seen. So Rakesh, I would like to start with you. You can begin and time yourself for 3 minutes.
Sure, Jency. Thanks. First of all, thanks for putting this panel together, because regional languages and vernacular has been, like you rightly said in your opening remarks, has been one of the biggest challenges in a diverse country like India. To start with, how is regional different from, let's say, English fact checking, so to speak? I consider Hindi also as a vernacular language. One being, we are looking at the kind of the audiences are very different. So we have audiences who, for instance, are elderly, who may not have spoken English, who whose first brush will be all, most of them could be first generation internet users, or people who are using technology for the first time only through their smartphone. So they didn't have this learning curve of, let's say, a desktop, a laptop, or an iPad, etc. But they directly jumped onto the smartphone. So we are looking at a very unique set of users who technology for the first time, internet for the first time. And we're also looking at age groups. So a lot of the elderly people, also don't converse in English. So we are looking at one big section where multiple studies have said the elderly become the biggest distributors of fake news. So we're also reaching them. So regional in that sense is very different because the audiences are different. We're also reaching the ones who are at the forefront of the distribution. I mean, they're not doing it intentionally, but they unfortunately they become carriers, sharing, forwarding, and with the advent of cheap data, I think the problem has become multifold. So regional fact checking becomes very, very important in that context. Secondly, I also believe each state is different. Of course, I can only speak for where we are doing, the Telugu states and Kannada. So what we also see is the social milieu and the kind of social issues that we face also plays a key role. So for instance, in the South, you see films and film stars being a big point of discussion other than politics. So we see a lot of misinformation around film stars, their adulation, their insecurities and all that. So that also makes regional fact checking slightly very different. Also, for instance, we have a lot of hyperlocal content, hyperlocal user generated content in regional, which probably we don't see in English because of the nature. And at times it becomes very difficult because what all it takes is just a smartphone, somebody taking a video and uploading it. So that is also slightly very different in the regional language fact checking. And another big challenge, I would say, in the regional is how the media is structured. So legacy mainstream media in regional is still, I think, yet to catch up with the technological progress. So I see a lot of journalists being technologically challenged. I'm sure Surabhi will tell her experiences of what has changed through the training in the last 2 years. But so I see that as a big challenge. So all in all, all these put together, while it throws up a lot of challenges, regional is very different. But at the same time, I would say it is one kind of fact checking which probably gives us the highest impact in terms of opportunities. So we're looking at, let's say, both Telugu states put together have about, the population is around 100 million. So we're looking at reaching a large section of this 100 million the moment you do a fact check in Telugu, irrespective of who they are. So in terms of behavior, in terms of impact, in terms of distribution, I would say, while it may not be as easy as fact checking in English, but at the same time, the impact and the opportunities are really, really high. So that makes the regional language fact checking challenging at the same time and very, very impactful and satisfying.
Okay, thanks, Rakesh. That was quite a lot of points that you packed within those 3 minutes. Next, Rahul, I would like to come to you. You are fact checking across 10 languages. Please tell us what are the differences that you found probably when you look at fact checking in English and in multiple languages. I remember you telling me that it's not easy because sometimes when you're fact checking in the languages where there was no focus on what regional media was publishing, and suddenly as a player you come in and you start looking at their stories quite closely, there's a lot of pushback. So do tell us about what your challenges are.
Okay. See, we need to understand that India's linguistic diversity makes everything more complicated. We're doing 8 Indian languages and 3 international. So what happens with the regional thing is suddenly the local publishers who've been there, who've been used to doing a lot of things they were doing, suddenly they our intervention feels like we are a censorship for them, or we are putting forward the right perspective, or the right narrative in front of their users. As Rakesh said, most of these regional people, their first point of exposure to the internet is via their smartphone. So everything that goes viral, so mostly regional that challenges that we've been facing is a lot of threats and intimidation. the regional audience is defined. So people exactly know what are their issues. What happens is like the moment we start putting we start doing fact checks, or we start putting one sort of facts in front, someone is going to come and they are going to say that we are being biased. To keep, it's very difficult to maintain a balance between these things, especially political parties, because they are local politicians. They there are times when they come out, they publicly post fact checker images, publicly calling out. So these are some of the challenges that are there. And yes, acceptance comes after some time, once that trust is built. So with us, that was one good thing, and now we think we've been accepted, and our fact checks are a way of people understanding of this. That is because we get a lot of requests coming in from these regional areas regarding fact checks. uh, we also believe that there is a lack of awareness in authorities about the effects of fake news on the regional level. So what happens is like it becomes an impediment in the investigation when we contact authorities. They Some of them even don't know what fact checks are. So these are some of the challenges that we've been facing, and we think over time, it will take some time to overcome these things. Um,
Yeah. Yes. So Rahul, that's quite quite important for you to point that out. That when we contact authorities, many times they don't know who the region fact checkers are, because
right.
all of us have come up in the last 3 to 4 years. So how do you convince them? And convincing them only comes in with the quality of work that you do over a period of time. So I do take your point there. I'd like to come to Trushar next. Trushar has been a digital editor for several years, has done fellowships, and have also researched misinformation and how it spreads in communities and across social media. Now working with Facebook as well, and one of the key point person for all the fact checkers in India. Trushar, please tell us, in your role as a digital editor, and now across on the platform side, which role do you like better? And I would also like you to have your opening remarks as well, keeping this in mind.
Sure. Hi again, Jency, and hi everyone. Apologies, I may have slightly patchy internet connection, so you might see me switching into a sort of a mugshot of myself. Let me just start off, Jency, I suppose, with overall just thinking about the challenges and how we approach them in India. I think, so I've been at Facebook for just over 18 months, and when I joined, a big focus was obviously the world's biggest election, which happened in the summer last year here in the country. And we realized that the big challenge, first of all, was really having some sense of scale and building out the fact-checking ecosystem in India and helping to support that growth. So, as you know, Jency, you were the first fact-checking organization boom in India, and we had added AFP by the end of 2018. But that was just, still two fact-checkers, fact-checking in a couple of languages in such a massive country with so many languages has already been sort of explained. And so the first real challenge was helping to grow and expand the fact-checking partnership. And so with, working very closely with the organizations and getting IFCN's support to accredit a lot of organizations, we managed to get to 7 fact-checking partnerships by the time the election came round. And they had managed to expand the languages that were being covered in India to about 10, I think, by then. That's still not enough, but we knew that was a minimum target that we really had to achieve. So that was, I guess, one initial challenge, which was, really launching and starting to expand coverage across India and building out our sort of partnerships. And I guess the other area which often gets talked about is scaling this across our platform. I often see reporters who are reporting on fact-checking and misinformation in this country, but also in other parts of the world. They'll often say, but, there's like a handful of fact-checking organizations. They may have a handful of reporters or not many people in their newsroom. How can they possibly fact-check at scale? And I think one of the things that people don't understand is that there's this real symbiotic sort of relationship that happens with the expertise, journalistic expertise and fact-checking expertise that all the fact checkers bring to our platform, which is essential. And then mapping that with our own technology and particularly using AI. So one of the things I think that has really improved over the years, over the last 18 months or so, is the ability of our own AI systems to recognize potential misinformation in multiple Indian languages. And we can only do that by building out training data that helps our algorithms understand that. And that happens because of the work and the fact checks that all of you do in the country, because every time there is a fact check in, say, Hindi or Gujarati or Punjabi or Urdu, our algorithms get a little bit better at detecting misinformation in that language on our platform, which means that the potential queue of suspected misinformation that we provide our fact checkers as part of our program gets better. So, Jency, you'll know that when you first started and working on our program, the quality of our queue wasn't great. We still know that it has to improve, but it's made significant progress since then. And I think that's one of the big things that was really important for us to sort of manage as a challenge. And finally, I guess just across our platform. So obviously Facebook is the biggest, but Instagram increasingly is becoming a very big platform in India. And so over the last few months, we've scaled out the work that you do across the impact it has on Instagram as well. I know there are other sessions that are talking about WhatsApp and how it works with fact checkers. So again, in India, we've been trying to build up better resilience for fact checkers to build out fact checking tip lines at scale and building in more automation into the way they do that on WhatsApp as well. So I guess those are the sort of challenges and how we're looking at trying to approach them. And briefly, your question about my previous role compared to what I do now with the platforms. I guess when I was working in a more of a journalistic environment, there was a lot of focus on just understanding the right workflows for a newsroom. What are the different roles that the journalists in the newsroom have to have? Teaching them on the right sort of tools and techniques to forensically examine pieces of content to see if they're misinformation or not. And I think one really interesting thing that I've discovered over the time that I worked in those roles in the past is that having a dedicated unit that specializes in UGC verification or fact checking, for example, in the heart of the newsroom, it really has a very positive effect across the wider newsroom. And I've gone through many occasions when journalists have said, well, why do I need to know about social media? I'm a journalist first. But actually having a sort of in-house center of excellence really helps upskill the rest of the journalists in the newsroom. And I think that's really, really important as well.
Yeah. Tushar, thanks, for all those points that you mentioned. In fact, since we have you with us on the panel, there is a lot of criticism about Facebook as well, which I will come to you very soon, and I will ask the fact checkers themselves to bring up those points. We are not going to leave you without answering some of those questions. Surabhi, coming next to you, as a former journalist and then getting into digital training and also media literacy, I know some of the challenges you have faced because I worked quite closely with you even on developing the initial the entire subjects and what has to be taught as a curriculum when we went ahead with it in 2018. Please tell us about what are those very key challenges that you faced, and also as far as how far the work has gone ahead till now. In fact, not many people know the extent of the work that has really gone in taking media literacy into regional languages and also among regional journalists.
Right. Thank you, Jency, and hello, everyone. My name is Surabhi Malik, and I'm the program director in India for Internews. In 2018, we launched a fact-checking training program for journalists in India in collaboration with Google and other partners like BoomLive, Data Leads, News, Storyful, and First Draft. The very long list of partners, of course, reflects to do a program in a very diverse country like India needs big partners. So we had them along, thankfully with us. And if someone asks me, has it often I'm asked, has it been difficult or really easy? So I would say handling misinformation in languages in India has neither been easy nor difficult. When I say not easy, in fact it has been one of the most interesting challenges that I have taken up in my journalism career, and also a good learning journey for me and also for Internews. If I may talk of why I say it's not easy, that's because attempting an exercise of this scale in a country as diverse in India in terms of language and the media landscape is certainly no mean task in itself. And when I say it's not been difficult, that's purely because of the sheer support that we got from the fact checking community, from the journalism community. Seeing, in fact, we witnessed sort of an unprecedented level of collaboration between journalists who really felt for this cause, coming together to help each other. A lot of times it was voluntary, not even bound by contracts. So I think that was the beauty of the entire program. And sort of the opportunity that we saw, or the ray of hope, or silver lining, whatever you may call it. And the program sort of has mainstreamed, fact checking with the help of partners like, Jency's Boom Live and other organizations. I think there's been a lot more discourse about fact checking, which really is a biggest dent that we've been able to make. But going back to the program, before I talk about, what some of the key challenges, I think it's very important for the audience in here, especially folks who are joining, from outside of India, to understand a bit more about, where we come from. I know Jency dwelled into some of the numbers, but getting slightly more detail into that, a lot of you would know we're a country of 1.36 billion. That's the sheer scale of our population. But we also happen to be the second largest internet population and the largest user base for platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook and TikTok, and hence we've seen a huge load of misinformation coming our way. We're also the biggest media market in the country, with about 17,000 dailies in different languages, and also 300 plus news channels or satellite channels. But when we began, this program in 2018, or if I may just rewind and go back a little, earlier, when I started training journalists, as a Google News Initiative fellow, visiting different newsrooms, I saw there were only four, like Jency mentioned, by about 2016, 17, four dedicated fact-checking organizations really handling all of the sea of misinformation. While, like Jency mentioned in the intro opening remarks, we have about 22 official languages, and not just that, about 122 other main languages. So, we sort of set out to fill this, void, to see how we can have more people understand how to fact check, through our program, and get, support of journalists and newsrooms, on board. And we looked at some key, languages. Of course, out of the entire internet population in India, a majority chunk, especially new internet users, look at non-English content. So we had to look at languages for sure. Hindi, of course, forms a very key part. And going back to the four main, fact checkers back then, I think mostly they were doing fact checking in English, if at all, some in Hindi. So we knew there was, huge gap we had to fill in, for languages. So from there, we picked up, languages like Bengali, Tamil, Telugu, Marathi, and Kannada, which were the top, languages spoken widely. And decided, we should train more, journalists on this and see what we can do, with it. But the biggest challenge that we faced then was, resources. I mean, almost all resources that were available back then were in English. Also, most of the resource persons were in English. And to help us sort of, tackle this, what we did was we built a community. I mean, we thought we'll do a train the trainer model and build a community of fact checking trainers, and partnered with wonderful partners, like Boom Live, like Data Leads. We also had a technical partnership with First Draft, Storyful, and Alt News. We brought all of them together so we could really not just translate, but also localize all of the material that was available. There were people practicing fact checking, but none of them were really aware of it in India. I personally had traveled to many newsrooms in my previous role, even before moving to Internews, to see that not many were aware of the simple tools or advanced level fact checking. So with their help, we sort of built a curriculum and onboarded a set of about 200 trainers. We trained them through 7 boot camps in 7 different languages. And then once they were trained, they went back in their own cities and did trainings in their own languages. So, I mean, through this TOT, we had experts who could take this know-how to their colleagues, in press clubs, in newsrooms, in colleges, in these many different languages. And as a result, as you probably saw in Jency's first slide, we now have come a long, distance. Of course, there's a long road, but from 2 fact checkers to about 14 IFCN certified fact checkers now, across 15 languages. And not just that, my latest tally also says that there are about at least as many more organizations doing fact checking in some form in a lot of these languages. So they probably are not doing it as extensively as the IFCN organizations as yet, but good to see that they are trying to take these fact checking initiatives, or fact checks to their audience. So as a result, of course, a lot of trainers launching their own initiatives or their own teams. There was far more fact checking happening in the ecosystem. So, in end, a lot of our users had a better chance to know, whether a piece of information that they were accessing was true or not. And it was a good mix of, I would say, independent fact checkers and also mainstream media. It has both its advantages and disadvantages, but I see a good mix as a good opportunity to sort of do what we are
Right.
aiming. I mean, tackling the challenge collectively. Um,
Right.
from here, I would also say the road ahead is long. We probably can't, win all of it all by ourselves. So our modest and humble effort will continue, but we need all of you by our side to see what more we can do in this space. Thank you, Jency.
That's excellent, Surabhi. Thank you for all the panelists for sticking to your time. As I can see, we have 20 more minutes to discuss several other topics, and then we will also want to leave some time for Q&A. So let me come to the first segment or the second segment, as we can call this. Rakesh, I would like to come to you. When we say that we are fact checking, that you're fact checking in Telugu and Kannada, uh, who are you fact checking? Are you fact checking the regional newspapers there? Are you fact checking the politicians and the political statements there, or are you fact checking what you're seeing on Instagram and Twitter and ShareChat and Hello and all these platforms and Twitter as well? What are you really fact checking? And if you can keep your answers brief as well.
Jency, I would say all the three, because misinformation in regional languages is not very different in terms of the combination. So we have social media misinformation, we have political statements or targeting as a political misinformation, social misinformation, and a large chunk also relates to regional media sharing misinformation. So it is a mix of all three. I think compared to English, the amount of misinformation by regional media is slightly higher, partly because I think the entire awareness and something that Surabhi was also talking about earlier, that proportion is a slightly higher, but it's a mix of all three. So on any given day, you ask me which one is higher, it all depends on the context. So if you have a major political event or an election happening, you have a lot of political misinformation, or if there is some social event, for example, like COVID, so we'll see a lot of medical, social related misinformation. And media, of course, with the advent of internet and with the advent of digital newsrooms, what we increasingly see is stories, these digital versions of the regional media generating stories out of the internet. So they randomly take some story from abroad, translate it without even cross-checking which is true. Quite a few times, I mean, we've almost every month we come across one or two such instances where satirical stories from abroad published by, let's say, the likes of the Onion are translated and passed off as real stories. So that happens a lot in regional media. So it's a mix. I wouldn't say which one dominates. It all depends on the context and the situation.
Right. Rahul, what about you? Since you're fact checking across 8 languages, do you see a lot of similarity in the kind of content that you see? That if there is, let's take COVID, for example, if you see something which is viral in one state, do you see that viral across other languages as well? Or are you seeing different states having different kind of misinformation?
We see there are certain issues which get viral on national level. Those are the kind of things which reaches regional level. So it is not immediate, it takes time, but yes, something that is getting viral on national level definitely comes to the regional level. However, what we see is like if we divide India into zones, south we see a lot of uh, you know politics is there everywhere, all across the zones. But south, it is more of against RSS, BJP. We go to Maharashtra, it's a balance between 5 political parties. We go to Gujarat, it is more of their local issues, which are Patel issues or religious or pro BJP. So that ways, the issues are same. What we see mostly on regional levels is more of localized misinfo, mostly political. If we're talking about COVID, it would be cures, which probably are local things which are known in that area, or and then it is it is a mix of all that we see in terms of misinformation. However, regional misinformation is mostly limited to political, local politicians, religious. Um, so this is what we've been seeing. This is what we've been seeing in all the states. Uh, was there any other question, Jency?
No,
Have I
that's fine,
answered
Rahul.
that? Or
Yeah, yes, yes. Tushar, if I can come to you, since your fact-checking program first began with English, then it went to Hindi, how did you decide on the other languages? What were the key elements that led Facebook to believe that, okay, these are the languages that we want partners in to come in and help us? For one, I can understand that West Bengal will be a focus. Kerala would be a focus. Gujarat would be a focus. Maharashtra also, because there are multiple political parties who are fighting for the same space. Do you think that whenever there is an election coming up in any specific state, as we can see in West Bengal in 2021, there is a stream of misinformation that spreads through Facebook and through WhatsApp and through Instagram for now, and that is how you decide that probably you want to bring in more fact checkers?
Yes, good question, Jency. I think we sort of try and triangulate a few different vectors around this to try and figure out what we think are the priority languages. So as you sort of said, one could be which are really significant high priority events that are coming up in the future that we want to try and really provide some resourcing towards. And elections, state elections, national elections are obviously one very significant high profile event. And so that's one thing we definitely consider when we sort of try and look ahead for the next year and say, okay, do we have enough language coverage? And if not, how can we try and help develop that and scale that up? The other is just the data around language speaking in India by population. And so we know that of the 12 languages we've sort of worked with so far, they are the most populous languages in India as far as spoken language is concerned. So I guess those are sort of the two main factors. I think one other is, we do increasingly look at data across our own platforms as well, and see if we are seeing increases in activity, in engagement, or virality across different languages. That generally, from what I've seen, really does reflect the population of that language as well in India.
Right. Tushar, as I promised earlier, before I come to Surabhi, we've got two fact checkers here on the panel, both Rakesh and Rahul. And I would like to ask both Rakesh and Rahul to tell us one thing that you would want Facebook to take really seriously when it comes to Indian language misinformation on the platform. And, I can ask Tushar also to respond after that. Rakesh, you can start.
We had an ask, I think, is partly. I think one thing that Facebook or even Google, for instance, if I may club Google, is this whole awareness around what is fact checking, what is misinformation. I think the scale and extent and the impact of this is really, really poor in terms of regional media. So we had a lot of media houses, for example, when we rate them, like Rahul was earlier saying, they feel it is censoring, they don't come back to us, they don't know how to appeal. So one is this whole awareness around this whole fact checking ecosystem around technology companies. So something like Claim Review. So I think if that awareness goes in, we would see a great change in regional media houses. They will know that there is some form of gatekeeping outside their newsrooms. So today it is all a relationship where they feel some small organization which doesn't even have 1/100th of their followers in that space is coming and trying to censor. I think that kind of feeling is there, especially with mainstream big media houses. I think one thing that the platforms could do is undertake large awareness campaigns on how they'll help the media houses themselves. Forget about people like us, but how will it help the ecosystem? So my one ask would be of the technology companies is to large scale awareness among mainstream media as well as digital media in the regional space.
Yes, Rahul, what about you?
See, I second Rakesh on that. Publishers are, the way they need to understand what 3PFC program is, and they need to understand we are not their censorship. We are there to correct based giving evidences, and that needs to be taken positively. There is, it's a very simple process. They just need to update their, news, and that's it. But what happens is, like, some of the I'm talking in terms of regional, players. Some of the publishers take it too personally, and they start intimidating. They start, starting saying things about the company, putting our fact checker's profile or director's profile online on various of their social media handles, and asking a lookout for us. So somewhere that kind of support we would need from these platforms, where these publishers also understand that they too share the similar responsibility of we understand there could be misreporting, there could be a genuine error from their side, which can be corrected. There's no harm in putting a correction. So that kind of support, yes, we do require, and that is one thing that we would be asking. If you're talking Facebook in particular, that's one thing we'd be asking.
Okay, so Tushar, if I can bring both those questions together and also bring the larger criticism that people have about us as fact checkers working with Facebook as well, is that A, you are the one who's created that pipeline, and there is a lot of misinformation that spreads. How can you do it more using the algorithmic method so that you're not dependent on a very few set of fact checkers? And secondly, why don't you speak more about the program in the country, and tell people that that there is a way you can reach out to fact checkers as well, and also extrapolate and give more distribution to the work. So those are the two criticisms that you have that everyone has about this program, especially. How do you respond to that, Trisha?
Yeah, I think the idea of explaining the program much more effectively is completely fair. I think one of my main objectives has been, ever since I started, and also for this year and next year as well, is talking almost as relentlessly about the program, explaining it constantly about what it is, how it works. I think there has been progress compared to when we started. When we started, most people didn't even know what fact checking meant on Facebook, or that there was any fact checking happening. Now there is at least a broad awareness that Facebook works with fact checkers on our platform. And that might not sound like much progress, but actually it's quite significant that when I meet people, talk to people, they already have an awareness that Facebook works with fact checkers. The detail of it and how it works is still unclear to a lot of people. And I think that's what the next step really is. To just give you an idea of what we have been doing so far, we've had a number of sort of one-to-one sessions with various publishers where we take them through the fact-checking program, explain what it is, and also dispel a lot of misconceptions about it. I think the point that Rakesh mentioned and Rahul mentioned about being seen as censors is a fair one. I think a lot of publishers do see this as unfairly, that this is something that they are being treated with. And I think once you explain what we're actually trying to do, they are much more responsive. And I think the appeals process, once you dispel what exactly it is and how they can make corrections, that helps a lot as well. So I think there's definitely been progress there. But I totally agree that we need to keep on having those conversations, and we need to explain what the program is. So, on these sorts of forums, but also lots of events and conferences, speaking to various other stakeholders across different sectors of society. That's one thing we're going to continue to do. Another thing I think we've improved technically is that when a page does get a fact check, that there's more clarity than maybe there was before around how the page owner or the admins can understand what the page misinformation strike is about, understanding where they can get more information about the program through the right links, and also more clarity around how they can directly contact the fact checker. But as I said, we need to do more about this. And I think one of it will be more of as we continue to improve this sort of technical signposting of this sort of stuff. We've recently relaunched our publisher information center, which gives much more clarity, I think, on the program. And some anecdotal feedback I've had from several publishers said that this is much clearer as well. And I think there's always this issue around publishers, having this sort of ego about, why do we need to be told how to fact check? We've been an established news organization for decades, and who is this sort of new small startup coming and telling us what to do? And I think once they have a better understanding about this is not about us making commentary on their journalism, but we want to make sure that the highest quality journalism appears on our platform, and it's in their interests as well. I've been listening to a lot of recent publisher conferences where trust in news is becoming a core conversation in the news industry, and lots of news execs are talking about this as well. And I think it's publishers are realizing that the currency of trust that their audiences have with them as an organization is paramount to their long-term development as a news organization. And so they're seeing fact-checking as a much more relevant skill set that they need to demonstrate, not just in terms of their relationship with other fact-checkers, but also internally what they do as well.
Okay. Surabhi, in your role earlier as a digital desk editor, and one challenge that we've always talked about is whether our website desks or the publishing desks, are they aware of the risks when you start chasing viral stories for page views? And that's where fact checkers have got their maximum number of stories from, when they have gone ahead and fact checked mainstream media houses who have
Means
picked up stories which had no basis, no credibility, no authoritative sources. What is the challenge when you go and speak to these smaller newsrooms, in the states, and when you talk to them about publishing, are they well prepared for this? Are newsrooms really investing in training them, and how do you see that work happening?
I think, yeah, investing in upskilling, their own staff is something really which everybody should focus on, irrespective of, what language publisher they are. And like you rightly mentioned, Jency, I think it's the rush for publishing breaking news, which a lot many times has seen mainstream media fall for, some tricks which are uploaded on the internet, and that's when a lot many times fact checkers get to fact check mainstream media. Personally, if you ask me, I would say I think we all need to understand we are all part of the same ecosystem fighting the common enemy. So it shouldn't be, like a mainstream media versus, fact checkers at all. If at all, I think fact checkers we need to understand each one has its own strength. Probably we need to work in tandem to be able to better tackle, this problem. In my previous capacity as a media, trainer, and also with, Internews, I've seen in 2016 and 17, when I would visit, newsrooms, probably I had to ask, say, can I, get like 2 hours to, train you? But eventually when, a lot many of them, of course, maybe, it was more with English and Hindi first, but then also, in regional media, then a lot of them, realized it was a good investment of time to learn new things. So this culture of training and upskilling staff, while I'm sure all of us have been part of, newsrooms to understand that the media landscape, the ecosystem itself has seen such a huge change in the last couple of years. While we haven't had enough opportunities, in general, not just fact checking, but also a lot of other, tech related, topics for our staff to upskill themselves. So I think that's one key area where we really need to pay attention on upskilling the staff on, a lot of, key things, which is bound to pay, dividends, I think, for all organizations. So from there on, when organizations saw, it to be a good investment of time, then I would, I'm happy to share that a lot of our program requests were all organic. I mean, a lot of, then newsrooms came back to us and said, why don't you do, like a series with us? We have, several fact checkers who are now IFCN certified, who did went back and trained their entire, teams, both English, Hindi and, other languages as well. And if I may go back to the number that, I'd shared, so 14 IFCN certified fact checkers now, about 14 to 15 now doing it in English and Hindi both, and also for languages, like I said, maybe not as extensive, but I've seen mainstream media and independent fact checkers collectively about 9, in Tamil, 6 to 7 in Malayalam, Bengali, and Telugu as well. And I think they need to invest more time in really, upskilling themselves, learning more about, how to do, more independent investigations when it comes to fact checking to really up, the game. So I would say yes, going back to Rakesh's point, probably there are challenges, there. So quest to learn is there in journalists from what I've seen, but organization buy-in is important. Tech challenges as well. I think the more you equip your teams with, prowess to handle technology better, I think they get better at the game. Rakesh also mentioned, I think, Rahul, about the pushback from mainstream media. So again, I think both need to work together. Probably it's a good model. I know, Jency, you and Boom have been, partnering with some mainstream news organizations, running programs for them. So I see that as a good model as well. I mean, eventually we all have to reach a much wider audience than each one of us individually can. So, why not join hands and see what we can help each other, with. Tushar also mentioned, having a dedicated desk in, each of the newsrooms, and I so agree with this. I think it's not that fact checking is left to only a select few independent organizations. It has to be taken up by the majority, of media. We've seen results in English and Hindi, and also trickling in other languages as well, like I, just mentioned. But probably a little more work there, on organizational, capacity. Some focus that I would like to see, of course, is on resources being translated. A lot of resources that come up are in English, so a lot of push needs to be in translation, tools and research as well, language based specific researches, and tools built. So also regional media can upskill themselves and reach, do better, get better at the fact checking game.
Sure. Thanks, Surabhi. I think the time has come. The 10-minute warning has come to me. There are some questions that are coming in. Surabhi, I think your answer actually ties in with the question that Shaminder Singh has asked us: what more can be done or is being done in order to promote regional fact checking and also to overcome lack of resources? Now, this is a favorite topic of mine on how do we become self-sustainable. Let me throw that to Rakesh. Rakesh, if you can hear me, uh, you heard what Surabhi said about collaborations, about training, about verification. I do know that you also work with a lot of, lot of collaborative, systems there in Hyderabad and Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Can you please take this question? How do you ensure that more regional fact checking is promoted and the lack of resources do not become a reason for a lack of fact checking?
Yeah, Jency, like you rightly said in the opening remarks, that probably many of us are dependent on certain type of funding today for our sustenance, and that needs to change. And how will independent small fact checkers ensure that they continue operations and do this important work? I wouldn't say there's one solution that can help all of us. It has to be a multi-pronged approach. So I'm sure there will be a lot of grants available in the fact checking space from platforms, from non-profits, from academia. So independent fact checkers have to keep an eye out. So let's say getting into the IFCN ecosystem could be the first step, and then getting access to applying to these grants. The second would be, I'm not too sure of the subscription model, though we are also trying, but not very successful, especially because of the increasing number of organizations that are going behind a paywall. So I don't see how an individual would subscribe to 10 different, 20 different organizations. So I think a better model would be where a lot of independent organizations come together as a consortium and then offer a collective subscription where users would be more they'll be more willing to pay for such a wide array than just an individual organization. Some other partnerships that come to my mind are, I think trainings is one. If independent fact checkers who are well equipped, who they can extend trainings, and some sort of financial support could also come there. And like Surabhi was mentioning, I think support from partnering with mainstream media, whether it's television channels or newspapers, if they could be asked about a column every week or with some kind of financial incentive. I know media is in a very tough crisis today, but I'm not talking about today. I'm saying the good days will come. So if it has to be a multitude of efforts. I don't see one single. So there was, somebody was suggesting to us, why don't you start, helping brands in fact checking? So there are a lot of fake news going around, misinformation around brands, products, where companies are and some companies are targeted. So why don't you get into that? So I think the space is also dynamic and it's changing. So there's no one solution to how do we become sustainable. I think we have to play to our skills. So if we are skilled and if we believe, in addition to fact checking, we have certain other. I think fact checking alone, becoming dependent on platforms, and especially when the number of fact checkers grows into tens, it might become difficult because platforms also are, I think, limited in terms of reaching out. So I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach. In our case, we are trying to ensure how our existing other skill sets could be utilized so that we become sustainable irrespective of the support we get from the current funders. Jency, you're there?
I think Jency's just frozen. I'll chip in very briefly because Jency's got me as his sort of backup buddy if he does freeze. So there's one question, actually, Surabhi, you probably touched on this a bit as well, but Rakesh and Rahul as well. A question around the sort of fact-checking in India playing a part in digital literacy in the Indian education system. Are there any examples that you've seen of where the education system itself is now starting to teach younger people about fact-checking techniques and just being more aware of that ecosystem, maybe across different social platforms as well? Surabhi, do you want to pick that up first?
Sure. I would also like to start by talking. I know a lot of you have partnered with us for our previous program also, where we had not just journalists and newsrooms but also media educators be part of this entire initiative. We wanted to take fact checking training out, and that has really worked really well for us. We've seen many colleges now which never had their sort of curriculum updated, have fact checking as a semester training module which they now take to their students. Of course, a lot of scope to take media literacy to through them to a lot of other subsets, probably schools as well. I know there are a lot of other programs running in the country on not just fact checking but also media literacy or digital literacy. I think one very key thing for us here to focus on is we all know that a lot of our internet population has jumped directly to mobile interface. I mean, that's their first interface through to internet. Right on their phones and probably accessing a lot of social media. So news and information literacy is really key. We've just launched, our Fact Shala program, where we will be working with a lot of you again, trying to connect, journalists and fact checkers with local communities for them to take it, to people they work with, so they understand better the nature of online content, they see and how to actually spot misinformation. So yes, certainly, I think one key area that we all should focus on, including platforms, organizations like ours in media development and fact checkers, is media and news literacy.
Rahul, Rakesh, anything else you guys want to add to that?
Okay,
I think Surabhi covered most. Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Rahul.
I'll just want to add something. Being present in most of the regions, what we did, we started this individual thing called digital literacy, where before the COVID situation, we were going to the media colleges where there are budding journalists, and we were trying to educate them in terms of fact checking, giving them a extensive crash course. So that is what we've been doing individually on our part, in terms of educating the journalists who are going to come, making them giving them an introspect of what fact checking is, and what is the kind of impact that this is going to have in future. So that is what we've been doing on the individual level. Okay, your voice.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Tushar.
Yeah, so we're about to run out of time, I think. So we've got about 2 minutes left. Right. So I'm just going to quickly go to all of you just for some final thoughts. Surabhi, did you want to add something to that point?
Yeah, I actually also wanted to raise two more important points that we all should think, as people working in the ecosystem to tackle this problem. I know we talked about upskilling and also media literacy, but two other areas which really need attention, of course, are so rural and hyperlocal, reaching through them to these segments, so we know that we are covered there as well. And also formats. I really think, I know we had a panel discussion as well, I think yesterday or earlier, today, on formats. I mean, are we serving fact checks in the format that people understand, or do we need to look at other means? Really, probably also upskilling fact checkers on what are the different formats they could deliver their fact checks in. I know Boom does like a short flashcard, probably that works really well. Maybe a lot of us need to experiment with more formats to see what works better there for our audiences.
Thanks, Surabhi. So I'll finish with my final thought, and then I'll hand over to Rahul and Rakesh if you've got anything finally to say, which is that I'm just picking up the thread regarding funding. I think that's a really important point, that I think even for a platform like Facebook, we want to see fact checkers longer term being financially self-sustaining. And I don't think it's in anyone's interest for a fact checking organization to be financially dependent on just one or two sources of income. And the way I sort of see it is that it's almost like sort of startup funding to get the fact checkers going initially, build up their own sort of sustainable model, and give them enough resources to be able to expand and develop their coverage, build in more people locally. But yeah, longer term, I think absolutely, financial independence and sustainability is really, really important. And where we as an organization, by the way, I should also add as a final point, Jency, you're back, so I'll hand over to you in a second. But I'm very glad that a platform like Facebook pays fact checkers. Grants and other initiatives and training programs are really, really important. But I think ultimately, it's still cold hard money is important to be able to be financially sustainable for the longer term. And I think it's a really important thing that we as a platform have decided, we need to basically put our money where our mouths is and actually give you funding that allows you to grow and be sustainable as well. Jency, handing over back to you.
Thanks, Tushar, for being the savior as always, for covering up. It was smooth. Thank you for each one of you, Tushar, Surabhi, Rahul, and Rakesh as well, and the entire IFCN team. It was a good discussion for all of us, and also to go beyond just fact-checking stories, also to understand what each one of us are thinking. Thank you all. Good day.
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.
Pleasure
Bye.
talking
Thank you,
to
guys.
everybody.
Goodbye. Bye.